Okay, yesterday we stopped at D, so you should have these notes from yesterday, solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. You should have them all filled in. We did A, B, C, and D yesterday, and today we're going to do E and F, G, and H, and you'll probably also jump into the discriminant notes. So the first thing we're going to do here is figure out what A, B, and C are. So A in this case is 3, B is 5, C is 1. If you remember this from yesterday, you can keep on going. I'm going to plug in what you know to the quadratic formula. Hopefully you are all singing Pop Goes the Weasel in your head, right? We have a negative b, so a negative 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 5 squared, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a, so 2 times 3. So 3. So then just like we did yesterday, the next thing you're going to do is plug this what's under the square root into your calculator. Okay, so I'm going to add a calculator page, and I'm going to plug in 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times 1, and I get a 13. Okay, so then we have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 13 divided by 2 times 3, which is 6. Now in the previous problems, we've been able to reduce the square root. We either had the square root of 0 up here, or the other problems we had the square root of 100 on part A and the square root of 361 on part B, which we found was 19. So we've always been able to reduce the square root. If you cannot reduce the square root, or you can't take the square root, we don't know what the square root of 13 is, you try to reduce it. Like when I told you when we had the square root of 13, we could break it up into 2 factors. But 13 is unique in the sense that there's not another factor of 13. The only factors of 13 are the square root of 1 times the square root of 13. And that doesn't help you simplify it at all. So you can't simplify it anymore. If you cannot simplify the square root anymore, you're going to leave your solution as x equals a negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 6. That's what you're going to leave your solution as. There are 2 solutions there because one is adding the square root of 13, one is subtracting the square root of 13. But this is the most exact answer. If you were to plug this all in your calculator and get a decimal, you would have to round the decimal at some point. So we're not going to round the decimal, we're just going to leave it that way. Another thing you could do, if you were just feeling awesome, you could do negative 5 plus the square root of 13 divided by 6, and x equals negative 5 minus the square root of 13 divided by 6. Those are your 2 roots. That's broken apart. But you don't have to do that. You could leave it as a plus and a minus right there. That's your solution. Okay? Cool. So let's try F. The first thing, figure out A, B, and C. In this case, it's equal to 0, so you know you can find A, you can find B, you can find C. You want to try this one on your own, on your mark, set, go. We'll have to do a little bit more in just a second, but A is 1, B is negative 8, C is 9. So you got x equals negative B, so a negative negative 8, plus or minus the square root of negative 8 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 9, all over 2 times A, 2 times 1. From here, we simplify what's in the square root. So we got x equals a negative negative 8 is a positive 8, plus or minus the square root of, you got negative 8 squared minus 4 times 9. So you can plug that into your calculator. Use parentheses, negative 8 in parentheses, then square it on the outside of the parentheses. Minus 4 times 1 times 9 inside your square root, you should get 28. So we write a 28 here. Divided by 2 times 1 is 2. Okay. You'll notice the first thing, you cannot take the square root of 28. So then you say, can I simplify it? Can I take the square root of 28 and simplify it? Okay. The square root of 28 is the same thing as saying the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. Right? 4 times 7 is 28. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 7 is the square root of 7. It's not a pretty number, so we're going to leave it like that. So the next thing we can do is, instead of writing the square root of 28, we can write 2 square roots of 7. So you got 8 plus or minus 2 square roots of 7 all over 2. If you have a square root left, okay, instead of breaking apart like we did yesterday, we broke it apart and we added up top, and then we broke it apart and we subtracted up top and then divided by 2. Instead of doing that, because you cannot add an 8 and a square root and get a nice pretty number, it's going to give you a decimal, we're going to divide by 2. So we're going to divide 8 by 2, and we're going to divide 2 by 2. You never divide the square root by the number underneath. You only divide a number in front. So does 2 go into 8? Yes. It goes in 4 times. Does 2 go into 2? Yes. It goes in 1 time. So we'll have 4 plus or minus 1 square root of 7. That's your answer. And actually we could write x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 7. That's reduced. Okay. Let's try 2 more. On G, it's set equal to 0. So we already know A is 3, B is 5, C is 4. Plug it in. X equals a negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. So 4 times 3, that's your a, times c, that's your 4, all over 2 times a, which is 3. Okay, the next thing you're going to do, plug in the square root, simplify the square root first. So we're going to plug in a 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times 4. You get a negative 23. Okay, when you get a negative, we got x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 23 divided by 2 over 3 is 6. Or sorry, 2 over 3. 2 times 3 is 6. You look at your square root. Can I simplify the square root of negative 23? Okay. Well, 23, you can't break it down. The only factors of 23 are just 1 and 3. But what happens when you have a negative number that you're taking the square root of? You got to break it down into the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 23. What's the square root of negative 1? It's I. What's the square root of 23? We can't break it down any further. It's messy, so we leave it the square root of 23. So our solution is going to be negative 5 plus or minus I square roots of 23 divided by 6. From here you say, does 6 go into the number in front? No, 6 does not go into 5. 6 doesn't go into I, so we're going to leave it like this. So our solution is that right there. Got questions, ask. Let's try H. Is H equal to 0? No. So we have to get it equal to 0. We got to move that negative 13 over to the other side. So I'm going to add 13 to both sides. So I get an x squared minus 4x plus 13 equals 0. I know A is equal to 1, B is equal to negative 4, C is equal to 13. I'm going to plug in what we know. X equals a negative B, so a negative negative 4, plus or minus the square root of a negative 4 squared a b squared minus 4 times a times c. So minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 13, all over 2 times a, which is 1. From there you simplify it. You got x equals a negative negative 4 is a positive 4 plus or minus the square root of whatever's underneath here. So you got a negative 4 squared. You got negative 4 squared. Make sure your negative 4 is in the parentheses, the square is on the outside. Minus 4 times 1 times 13. It gives us a negative 36. So I have a negative 36 inside my square root and 2 down below. From here, you look at your square root. Can you take the square root of a negative 36? Yes, you can. Since it's negative, what's the square root of, we can break it apart, the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 36. Because what do we know about the square root of 36? It is 6. What's the square root of negative 1? I. So the square root of negative 36 is 6i. So what I'm going to write next is x equals 4 plus or minus 6i divided by 2. Now, since it's a 6i, I can't combine 6i and 4, so I'm not going to break it apart into the 2 arrows that we did earlier or yesterday. The next thing I can do, since I can't combine those, I'm going to divide 4 by 2, and I'm going to divide 6 by 2. What's 4 divided by 2? It's 2. So I have x equals 2 plus or minus, what's 6i divided by 2? It's 3i. That's your solution. 2 plus a 3i and 2 minus a 3i. Those are 2 solutions. Okay. Now what we're going to do on the next video, I'm going to talk about the discriminant. We're going to skip this for today. We'll talk about our discriminant notes, and then we'll come back to these and fill in the type of roots.